over concerned that he was all right. He was even sick during that time. My mom took care of him and nursed him back to health. And I remember for 2 weeks that guy was at my house. I was like, man, this is great, right? Actually, I lied. After a while, you're like, man, that friend's annoying, you know? Like, when you can't get, and someone's around for a while, you're like, this guy's cool. And after a while, you're like, oh my gosh, this is annoying, you know? We were getting in fights like we were brothers, you know, and everything. But, you know, one thing I noticed is that his parents were just kind of like, they dropped him off. And they didn't really care where he was at because they were just out, he was out of the house. And I think that sometimes we have to make sure that we are under that understanding that as NewGen leaders, as NewGen teachers, that's something we have to keep in mind is that sometimes, amen, there's not the support system that we have at home. See, I judged my friends sometimes based on my support system. I thought that everybody was like my household, right? My mom would make fresh cookies and things like that, right? And when I would take my cookies to school, my friends would actually buy my cookies off me. I was like the cookie plug, amen, before there was a cookie plug, amen. And so what was the thing, man? I was like, man, I was hustling cookies all the time. I kid you not, I would sell my sandwiches and things like that at the middle school table. But then there's that other kid that's in the middle right there, John. And John is actually in prison right now for life. He will never get out. He's without the possibility of parole. And John was one of my close friends. In fact, that was the house that I went to. Because John was a church kid, and so my mom automatically assumed that as another church kid that household was the same way. And so I knew that Jason was not churched, right? Because he was wearing all the cool like Iron Maiden and you know Metallica shirts and things like that. And my mom would kind of bring him over, and she would kind of teach him how to kind of live in a way that's a little bit more godly. And so we had a godly household in my house. But for John, I would go to his house, and the thing is, just because it was a church-going family, did not mean that it was a family that was rooted in the same principles and morals that I was at in my household. So sometimes we think that just because a kid comes to church, that kid's not as important to evangelize to as the one that's actually, this one's a new, fresh kid off the street. But John's in prison. His brother was shooting up heroin right in front of us. My mom didn't know that. They were doing cocaine. The first time I'd gone over to John's house, they were huffing, paint inside of their bedroom. And so that was the thing I was exposed to when I went over to that church kid's house. So guess what? In our churches, believe it or not, these kids are going home and they're experiencing all three of these things. Some of them are good, coming from good families, and some of them are coming from what we think might be a good family, but actually has a lot of things going on. The cousin, the uncle, the nephew, they're involved in drugs and gangs and different things like that. Or they're coming from a family that we already know is lost, right? And so we're reaching all three. We have to make sure that we are not just focused on one demographic, but we are focusing on all three of those types of kids. It's so important, right? So important. One of the things that I want to do is I want to go through three things with you today. The first one is middle school, right? The pedagogy, middle school pedagogy. What is pedagogy? Pedagogy is the method and practice of teaching. So I'm going to give you a lot of practical stuff, but I want to tell you a little bit about what a middle schooler is. So middle school, the name says it all, is the first thing we're going to look at. The second thing is the methods for the madness, right? Best practices. And number three, sometimes we're dealing with special needs students. Over the years, I have found that the amount of special needs students that are coming into my classrooms has been increasing at an exponential rate every single year. So I feel like we need to address some of those things. So I just put down there, help, I'm a volunteer, right? Like you just volunteered for this, and now all of a sudden you got to deal with all this other stuff. So one of the things I want to go over with you today is, the first is middle school, right? The name says it all. But what exactly are they in the middle of? Right? What exactly are they in the middle of? Because we say middle school, well, they're between what? Primary, right? Or the elementary school, and they're all the way up to the high school, or I forget what it is in Manchester. Maybe Manchester could put it there. Secondary, right? So they're in secondary school. But one of the things is they are in the middle of that. They are definitely in the middle. So what does that look like for a middle schooler? This actually happened in one of my schools at middle school. And this kid was in the office, right? And my principal sent out an email to everybody. And he said, do you want to know exactly what middle school is like? He goes, this is the type of kids that we're dealing with. This kid was down in the office because he had used every 4-letter word in the book, right? Had completely cussed his teacher upside and down. Every F word, everything that was connected to the F word, right, was just blasting his teacher out there openly in front of everybody. But the same kid was banging a kitty cat folder. On the outside of his folder was a kitty cat, no joke. And so the principal took a picture of that and sent it out to all the teachers. Like, you got to remember that these kids are literally, they are just kids. They're just kids. Check out this guy looking on his face, right? You've been to a middle school dance, right? Like, come on, keep moving those hands up, brother, right? They are stuck in the middle. In fact, what they are doing is they're leaving one stage of development. They haven't even fully entered into a second stage, and they're this in-between stage. They're basically going into the formal operational stage, right, of their cognitive development. So you can look at the look on this kid's face, and it says it all about middle school. It says it all. Like, you know, like he's just looking like with his eyes all big, right? Like he wants to be an adult, and he's dancing with this girl, right? And he's, you know, so come on now, somebody. You're dancing with this girl, but you're literally just like this, like, I am scared to death. And it looks like, you know, like I want to step into like being more mature, but I know that I'm not mature, and I don't even know what I'm doing right now, right? And he's afraid all eyes are on him. He is completely by himself. He's up there, and he's just like, my goodness, like, what am I doing here, right? See, this formal stage of operational development of this cognitive stage is this. See, all of a sudden, adolescents can start understanding abstract thoughts. They enter into a world of hypothetical possibilities and demonstrate egocentrism, right? They're like egocentric, right? Or a heightened self-focus. What does that mean exactly, right? What does that mean? Well, it means that basically they have all this attention on them, and they feel like they have an audience all the time. Like literally, like they think like they're like me right now, where everybody's looking at me, right? There's all these people who have their eyes on me right now. But as a middle schooler, that's exactly the way they feel, just sitting there in their chairs. They feel like they're constantly have this awareness of people from the outside looking at them. Whereas if you're a little kid, maybe from elementary school or from the primary grades, you don't have that awareness. You don't have that awareness of like you know, people staring at you. You're just playing, right? You're just playing with everybody. But as a middle schooler, all of a sudden you're making decisions. If I play with that person, what will everybody else think because they're watching me? So all of a sudden, social interactions change, physical interactions change. The way they look changes. Everything begins to change because now they're not thinking of it just from a concrete, but they're thinking from an abstract. What if? What if? So when you look at a NewGen, you want to think about what if. That's what they're thinking. What if I do this? What if I do that? Well, I don't want to do anything that's wrong. I don't want to stand out. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Because what if people judge me? People are looking at me. If you laugh, they're like, what did you laugh at me for? Right? Come on now, you know what I'm saying, right? Those who've been working with NewGen for a while. As soon as somebody laughs, they're like, you were laughing at me. Bro, I didn't even know you were in the room, right? So that is exactly what we experience with the NewGen. They are stuck in the middle of this situation. They're experiencing so many physical changes, right? Puberty is kicking in right now, right? Puberty, raging hormones, right? They might be angry, they might be moody, they might have exaggerations, right? This is the time where girls are, you know, starting to have that time in their life where, you know, where their bodies are changing, right? Men, like their voices start to change, like you said, like they start screaming like girls in the car, right? Like I kid you not, like this guy in my class, he'll have this manly voice, but then if he starts to raise it at all, it's like, ah! You know, I'm like, what is that? Like I literally thought there was like a little girl next to me or something like that, and it's him. And so they start having all these bodily changes, right? They start maybe even like having hair, and they start getting smelly, right? This is the time in their life where like all of a sudden they get introduced into, hey, this is called deodorant, right? This is what you stick underneath your arm so that people can actually hang out with you still, right? And that's no joke, right? Like there's people, like young people, I got to actually pull aside, and I got to teach them hygiene because, like they said, one of them might be one of those friends that you saw up there. Not all of them had mom that said, hey, here, kid, I got you some deodorant. And then dad's like, this is how you put it on, son, right? You know, like, this is how you shave, right? I've taught over the year when I was in the gang in Sacramento. I remember I taught so many young men how to shave. I've taught so many young men how to shave. Just bring them over to the sink. Hey, man, here, I got you a razor. Let's get this handled, all right? Well, how do I do that, right, without cutting my face all up? It's amazing me, and these are men that are like, they're 17, 16, 17 years old. They're even past that stage, but no one's ever taught them before, right? So you've got to come through and teach them. I've got to teach kids in my class sometimes body hygiene. I've got to sometimes figure out a way to be able to talk to them about, man, like, I'm sorry, but you stink. You smell. Like, how can I help you? Or, hey, I got you some things. Or, hey, you know what? You won. I picked a number out of a hat, and here's a whole basket full of goodies for you, right? And they're like, I didn't even know I entered a contest. Yeah, you won. What did I win? Deodorant, and all kinds of good things, right? They're like, wow, okay, toothbrush, all right, Their body's changing though, right? They might even be putting on weight, right? Their voice starts to crack, all those kind of things. What's next? We're gonna kind of sum up all this stuff in a minute. But also they're starting to have social awareness, right? They're heightened self-awareness. This is a key right here. They have high expectations, but they lack confidence. So in other words, they don't want to do it if they can't do it perfect. If they can't do it perfect, they don't want any part in it, right? They would rather not do it at all if they don't think that they can meet the high expectations that they have in their own mind. I can't do it, so therefore I just won't do it, so I don't have to prove that I can't do it, right? I don't want anybody to know that I can't, so I just won't, right? You guys get what I'm saying? High expectations but lack confidence. They desire popularity and influence in their group and their peer groups, right? They desire a lot of popularity. They desire to be liked by people, right? And that's kind of normal for everybody. But this is the first time in their life where they actually really start to understand that, hey, people aren't going to like me. Like, well, why don't you like me? And they start to realize that not everybody in the world is going to like their personality. Not everybody in the world is going to want to be their friends. When they're little in elementary school, a lot of times they're buddy-buddy with everybody. They're going around they'll go and play with this group of friends. They'll go play with this group of friends. They'll play with this person over here. They don't care if they smell or not because they all smell, all right? So, and the other thing is, this is where they start to get eating disorders and depression, right? I've been experiencing more than ever before. Like I said, I believe that there was the CDE actually came out and actually had a report that came out that 3 young people actually have a undiagnosed psychological disorder. 1 out of 3 have basically a psychological disorder. And if I look in my classes and I over the years, I can tell you that they have been increasing like that over the years. I can tell it's been ramping up, right? That there's been a lot more, anxiety amongst young people. These disorders are starting to come up. Depression is at an all-time high, right? And so they're even putting in different things in our schools, like calm rooms for people just to go and calm down because they're really anxious at their schools. They don't want to be in their classes. They're wandering around. They're not coming to school at all. So these are really, really important things to actually understand. The other thing is brain develop. They begin complex thinking, right? Question everything, right? They start questioning everything. They have a strong sense of right and wrong and an ability to empathize, right? So what happens is they got a sense of justice. Like, that's not fair. They did that, and I didn't get to do that. That's not fair. They are using their phones, right? You tell them, hey, can you put your phone away? And they're like, yeah, but they're using their phones, right? Come on now, you know exactly what I'm talking about. They have a high sense of justice, so they want everything to be fair, and they start to reason in their minds like, hey, there is such a thing as right and wrong. I don't just think about what you told me. I'm not just going to do it because you're my parent, right? I'm not going to do it just because you're my leader or my teacher. Now I get to question you. So now when you ask them to do something, they go, why? Why do I have to do that? Well, why do I have to put things away? Why do I have to be like this? Why do I have to be quiet, right? And because what they're doing is they're not so much challenging you as they are getting a sense of justice in their heads. And they're trying to figure out what is right and wrong and why do I have to obey certain things and why should I listen to my teacher? There's got to be something that's beyond just the fact you told me to. See, in elementary school, you can get away with that as a teacher. You can be like, hey, Johnny, don't do that. Why? Because I'm your teacher. you can't get away with that. You're not going to be able to get away with just saying, hey, do this. Well, why? Because I told you so. I ain't going to do what you tell me to do. And that's exactly what they'll tell you, right? They might not use those words, but they might just avoid you, or they might do something else, right? And the other thing is this. They have their ability to empathize. In other words, they start kind of like thinking to themselves, you know what? I really feel sorry for this person over here. Or you know what? They start to think about like, man, I wish I was like this person. And they start comparing themselves, and they have this empathy, right? Where maybe they see somebody that's getting bullied in class, and they know in their spirits and their hearts, they know in their minds that that's not right. They start for the first time really like seeing themselves in that person's shoes. In fact, I have an assignment in my class. It's actually walk a mile in my shoes, right? And I put up a quote from Tupac. Yeah, that's right. I use Tupac in my class. It says, if you walked a mile in my shoes, you'd be crazy too. And the kids are like, ooh, Mr. Myers likes Tupac. I don't like Tupac. I'm just using it to get their attention, right? And so, I'm using that, and so I tell them about how walking a mile in somebody else's shoes. What am I trying to do? I'm trying to build in the idea, the empathy, right? That if you got to think about it from that person's perspective, because it's right now that they're grabbing a hold of those concepts. And if you don't grab a hold of that and build in empathy to other people, then what takes place is they become selfishly minded, and they root themselves in that concept that it's all about me. And then they become an adult that's like that, and it's already deeply embedded in their minds. The other big key is this. They only have an attention span. Most of the time, you can actually take this across the board. Most people only have an attention span as large as their age. So if they're like 10 years old, then they have about a 10-minute attention span. If they're 15 years old, they have like a 15-minute attention span. So if you want to kind of think of it like this, you have a 10 to 15-minute window before you transition to something else, okay? I'm going to stop there for a second because I want to teach you guys a little bit of something about that. Because what will happen is you'll think, man, so I can only preach for 15 minutes? No, that's not what I said. You can only preach for 10 minutes at a time? No, that's not what I said. What I'm saying is a transition. So I might speak for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then all of a sudden what I'll do is I'll say, hey, check out this video up here. Boom, and there's a video. And then I'll speak for another 5, 10 minutes, and then I'll say, hey, guess what? I got this little illustration. Let's do this. And we spread out paper all over the whole room, right? And then all of a sudden I start talking about how this paper interacts with God's will and how God can break through the paper and, enter into time, and be able to mend broken hearts and mend, broken, people, right? So what happens is we can transition just by doing something different, getting them up out of their seats, doing a little like illustration in the front, doing a little bit of movement and things like that. I'm going to get into that a little bit more later on. But what does all this stuff mean for NewGen? In other words, they are alien life forms. They are an alien in their own body. Anybody that's worked with NewGen for a little bit of time will realize right off the bat, they are weird. Weird, freaky little people. Weird, strange, like they are not from this world, right? You're just like their bodies even look different. You're like, man, kid, you look weird. Like you haven't quite grown into some things, right? You're like, there's some awkwardness there. But the thing is, they're horrified of their own bodies. So check this out. They don't want it to be examined by anybody. An alien, right? They don't want their bodies being examined right on an operating table. What a kid feels like in NewGen is when you have them come up to the front and you're like, can I get a volunteer? And everybody's like this, right? Don't blink, they might call on me, right? They will not move. They're not going to lift up their hand. They're not going to do that at all. Why? Because they already feel awkward about their bodies. Think about this. If you already feel humiliated by your body and you think everybody's looking at your body, right? Oh my gosh, I'm developing in strange places. And as a girl, you start to have them come up to the front and then maybe they feel like their shirt's a little too tight or something like that. And all of a sudden they start hiding their bodies. You ever notice how NewGen always goes like this and they cross their arms? Right? Or they wear big baggy clothes a lot of times. They kind of pull themselves up like this. Why? Because a lot of times they're hiding their bodies because they feel like maybe things are changing and there's some things that are taking place and they don't want to be examined. So you might have some resistance to calling somebody up. So how do you work around that when you want to have the interaction? You want to have people to interact, right? Then what happens is you got to change the design. You got to get everybody moving up. You got to get everybody certain individuals, you got to set those things up ahead of time. Hey, Johnny, I'm going to have you come up, and I'm going to want you to pick out somebody, right? I have like a little ball in my classroom, and we throw the ball, and it lands to the people, right? And I love this because they have this ball, and they're like, okay, I'm going to pick, Joseph, and they throw the ball to Joseph, and Joseph goes like this and moves out of the way. I don't want it, right? Because if they catch the ball, then they have to speak. And they're like, I don't want to talk. I don't know anything. I have this high expectation of myself, but I don't want to speak because then people will know that I don't know. Oh, man, come on now. The other thing is an X factor. The X factor is this. Leaders might have less influence than Kid X. Okay, who is Kid X? Kid X equals anyone cooler than themselves, right? So what happens is, in fact, at NewGen, I was speaking at NewGen here. I had the great privilege of being able to speak here at the Mother Church for the NewGen. And one of the things I had seen was I was asking questions, right? And I was like, hey, what do you think, right? And everybody, right, I had asked them to like stand up or something like that. And everybody went like this and turned to the one high schooler that was in the group. And they went, is he going to do it? And they all I watched every single eye go like this over to the cool kid, right? The one that had the hierarchy in there. And if they did it, so what I did was I grabbed cool kid X and I made them my helper. All of a sudden, that took cool kid X up to my level here, and I made cool kid X my friend, and that cool kid X became the person who was going to communicate for me to have the rest of the group participate. And guess what? Everybody stood up. Everybody started to participate. So sometimes when we ask these questions, hey, who wants to participate? It has nothing to do with whether or not they don't want to participate. They're afraid of what participation will mean socially. So you have to be able to be smart as a leader, smart as a teacher, and begin to prepare ahead of time. I already know that no one's going to want to volunteer for this. So how do I get that person to volunteer? I'm going to pick this kid, and I'm going to pick this kid, and then I'm going to pick 5 others that will join in on this conversation. That's really key. The other thing is, you're just a baby, right? You're just a baby. Now, don't let the glimmer of maturity fool you. They are just kids in bigger bodies. Their bodies are developing at different stages. They're getting older. They look older. By the time they hit 8th grade, they look much, much older. But if I look at my little 6th graders coming in for the first time, they look like babies. I'm just like, oh my gosh, like this is like the littlest guy ever. You're so cute. I just want to grab your cheek. But the thing is, they're just babies. Even by the time they graduate and they go into the high school, into the secondary school, they are still just babies inside. So what happens is, I've seen a lot of times, is that we start to treat them like they're older. But the problem is they're still kids. They still got parents, right? They still have parents that we are responsible to, right? They're not making decisions on their own. That we have to work through those parental supervision. Remember, that's still somebody's baby, somebody's child that we got to take care of. So important, right? To remember that they're just a little kid trapped in a bigger body. That is absolutely true. So that means the way that we talk to them has to change. Sometimes, though, what happens is we get a little too, right, we get too sarcastic with them. That's one of my big things right there. Oh, my goodness. I'm a little sarcastic. And so I'll say like a little something sarcastic. I think it's funny, and I'm laughing inside. And then the kid's like, oh, you're mean. I'm like, oh, honey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. Oh, sweetie, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it like that. And they get hurt. And I go, oh, man, I took that joke too far, And I got to, take it back a step and kind of fix it real quick. Because you look at them and you go, oh, man, they can handle this. Or maybe even the way that they're expressing themselves to you might seem older. And you start kind of joking with them. And, but, man, I'm telling you right now, they are still kids trapped in big bodies. So you have to be careful what you say and how you treat them. Really important. Other thing is, they're rated PG, right? Parental guidance. Parental guidance. They're starting to pull away from their parents. So they're going to kind of start to kind of pull away from them a little bit, and they're looking for other adult models, other adults that they can look to rather than just their parents. So if they're not careful, right, we as leaders and we as the adults in the room, they are looking to you for an exampleship. And I know we know this, but I really need to drive this home. Because the thing is, if they're pulling away from their parents and they're starting to look at other people, other teachers and other older people as an example, And here comes this young lady, right? This young man, right? Who's, 20-something, and they're the NewGen leader. You're 30-something, you're the NewGen leader, and you're like, man, you're excited. They see you, and guess what? You're not going to be able to shake them loose. They're going to come, just like we were saying in the icebreaker beforehand, they're going to come, and they will always be by your side. They will want to be with you before they're with mom and dad. They're going to want to contact you before they contact mom and dad. So if you tell them something, listen, this is important. If you tell them something and you make them a promise, you tell them, hey, I'm going to call you tomorrow, and you don't call them. That is informing them about the adult in their life. You are modeling to them that the adult in their new adult in their life doesn't care. These are things that are fundamental. If I tell students something, remember they have a high sense of justice. So if I tell them something, tomorrow we're going to do this, they will hold me to that, to the letter. I'm kid you not. I thought you said we were going to do this paint today, Mr. Myers. I thought you said we were doing watercolors today. Are we just drawing again? I'm done drawing. I want to go do watercolors. And I'm like, okay, but we're not all ready yet. Yeah, but you said I could do watercolors tomorrow. So now what am I going to do? And they're really upset. And they're judging me based upon the things that I'm doing. And so we as NewGen leaders, listen, we're setting things up ahead of time. Sometimes I said you got to be careful what comes out of your mouth, because sometimes we promise things and we say things and we're going to do this and we're going to do that with you. And then when you don't do those things because you get too busy doing other things, then they're like, man, you're not the role model I thought you were going to be in my life. And they start to look for somebody else. But if they don't look to the role model who's in the church, they start to look at what role models? The ones in the world. Because they don't have any other role models left that are not their parents. They don't want to listen to mom and dad anymore. They're pulling away, which is natural, right? We want them to grow up someday and get out of my house. All right? My kids, they ask me, like, do we have to move out when we're 18? I'm like, yes. 18 is the limit, and I start charging you rent. Okay? No, I'm joking. I don't charge you rent, but I'm thinking about it, right? My dad charged me rent. It got me motivated, right? So anyways, I'm just joking. But the thing is, though, is that they start looking outside, and they start looking for other people that are, like, going to be that role model for them. TikTok tweenies. I call them TikTok tweenies. They're in between, right? They're not a teen, right? And they're not quite a teenager yet. They're like right beforehand. Social media has created the impossibly high standard for both boys and girls. It's not just for girls anymore that are aware of their bodies. It's guys too. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm not ripped. Oh my gosh, I don't have a 12-pack, right? They are looking at themselves in response to the people they see online. And so what happens is the standard, remember I said they have a high standard? So what happens if the standard isn't here anymore, just above them? What happens if the standard now is way, way up? And it keeps ratcheting up, and it keeps going higher and higher and higher. The higher the expectation goes, the lower they feel, and the more shut down they are, and the more depressed they are, because they're not like what they see. And they shut down. So we wonder why there's a lot of anxiety. The other thing is, right, Ray kind of nailed this, is that there's going to be a lot of excitement. If they see a spider in the room, buckle your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy day. Okay, no joke, one time in my classroom, kids were screaming because there was a little grasshopper, I know it was a cricket, that was running across their table, right? And they were freaking out. They're like, Mr. Myers, it's a cricket. Oh my gosh. I went over there, I grabbed the cricket, and I ate it. They thought I went like this and threw it behind me. And they're like, no, you didn't. Oh, yes, I did. They said, no, you didn't. And I'm like, I'm chewing, right? It's a little spinier than I thought it was going to be, a little bit crunchier. And I was like, and they said, no, you didn't. I went, ah. And I showed them on my tongue, the cricket that was on my tongue, and they just went like this. Myers, you're a savage. It was like mad respect after that. They were like, oh my God, my teacher is a savage. He grabbed that thing and just ate it right there. And you know what? I'm like, it's no big deal. It's just a cricket. And they're like, oh my goodness. And that set a tone that, man, I had massive respect in my classroom, right? I was like, don't do this at home, kids, right? One of the things is also, though, too, is that we have a methods for our madness, right? So what does that mean when we have all this stuff? A method for our madness. Well, I want to kind of go into best practices. So if you have your Bibles, you can turn to 2 Kings chapter 4, verse 32. We're going to kind of read there. It's talking about Elijah, right, or Elisha. And what happened was he came to a house, right, and he was there when a little boy had died. Basically, to kind of summarize it, it was like this little boy, he had prayed for this woman to have a baby. When the baby was born at about 8 years old, the young man ended up having a aneurysm in his brain out on the field with his father. He ended up hitting the ground, right, and literally just dying right there. And the mom pulled him into the house, put him up in Elijah's room. Elijah had a room. Put him up in Elijah's room, and then called for Elijah, the man of God, and went to go find him. And this is what it says. It says, when Elijah came into the house, there was the child laying dead on his bed. He went in, therefore, shut the door behind the two of them, and prayed to the Lord. It says, and he went up and lay on the child, and put his mouth on his mouth, right? And his eyes on his eyes. Someone say mouth to mouth. Someone say eyes to eyes. And say hands to hands. And then he stretched himself out on the child, and the flesh of the child became warm. And he returned and walked back and forth in the house, right? And again went up and stretched himself out on him. Then the child sneezed 7 times, and the child opened his eyes. The first thing is this, is that when we look at the man of God, and we look at a man or a woman of God in the NewGen ministry, we got to remember that we have got to learn how to communicate passionately and with hope. We have got to have a passion and we have got to have a hope, right? The Old Testament talks about the mouth being a vehicle for expressing the inner heart, right? The place where we hold our central and core beliefs. In fact, in the New Testament, what does it say? The mouth is also used as a way to express what is truly in the heart. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks, it says in Matthew chapter 12, right? See, there's a transmittal that's taking place, right? There's a transmission that's taking place, not just you speaking, it's not just words, but it's a transmittal taking place with this young man. In fact, it says breath for breath, right? Life was being transmitted into him. See, in the Old Testament, the word for breath means neshama. Someone say neshama. Neshama means this, is that basically it is the breath of life, but it also means inspiration. It means inspiration. Life and death, it says in Proverbs chapter 18, are in the tongue. Life and death are in the tongue. See, excitement is contagious, and when we have excitement that's there, see, you can imagine there's a lot of teachers that are out there. How many people had a boring teacher in high school, or, come on now, right? Man, like you could just put them to sleep, right? You'd be in the corner of the room or at your desk and just dying right there because you want to be anywhere but there because this person is just so boring, right? But it says excitement is a contagious thing. People are passionate about something, right, that we speak passionately about. That when we are starting to get passionate about something, see, NewGen's looking to you because they're looking for, they want to have that excitement, right? They want to have the mouth. You got to use your mouth to be able to speak life to people. Neshama was the breath of life that God said when he breathed life into the nostrils of Adam. It says that, guess what? That Adam became a living being and he became in the image of God. In other words, he became a creative being. He became somebody who was endowed with the ability to create as well, right? In the image of God. So what happens is if we want our NewGen to come to life, we want NewGen to come to life and we want them to be excited, but then we're not excited about NewGen. Maybe pastor told us we got to go do NewGen, and you're like, okay, I got to go die on my cross. I'm going to Calvary, right? And you're walking to NewGen like you're going up the hill of Golgotha, right? And so one thing is for sure, though, is what we have to do is we got to be able to be somebody who transmits passion for NewGen. If we're not transmitting it passionately, right, are they going to believe that you're passionate about them? We got to communicate passionately about them. The other things it says is this, that he put eyes to eyes. Not only did he put his mouth to mouth and breathe life into that young man, that NewGen, he breathed life into him. He's 8 years old. He's like transitioning into NewGen right there. Right? He breathes life into him. But also it says he put eyes to his eyes. What does that mean? That we have to envision NewGen and let them see something that they can't see. See, what you see in them, they will become. If you can see it in them and you're transmitting that life and you're saying, you know what, I believe that you're going to be different. I believe that you can do this. There's young people in my classroom that they're depressed, they have anxiety, they feel like they're throwaways. There was a young person that's at my school, and you know, one of the most beautiful things, he was in trouble there in the front office. Get this, and he said he was causing problems all the time, and I went up to him and I said, "Hey man, what's going on? Why are you always in trouble? I always see you up here in the office. What's going on?" And he goes, "Well, man, it's not even me. It's like everybody else. It's this, it's that." And I said, "Well, hey, man, like one of the things is we want to, as men, we want to make sure that we're making our families proud. See, that's coming from my perspective." And the kid looks at me and goes, "I don't have a family. I'm a foster kid. I'm in a group home." And I went, "Oh my gosh." Well, I said, "You know what?" So I already realized right off the bat that I put my foot in my mouth. And I told him, I looked at him, I said, "That's okay." I said, "Because you know what? We're your family." And I said, "And I want to let you know that I'm proud of you, but you know what? I want you to do better. I think you can do better. I don't want to see you in here." And this is the beautiful thing. It wasn't me. It was the secretaries in the room, right, in the office. They all got together and they called this kid out of class. It was on his birthday. They called him out of class and they said, "Oh, you're in trouble again." He comes up to the office, right? He's like, "Man, it's my birthday, and I'm getting in trouble again." They bring him into the back room. They say, "Hey, come on, the VP wants to talk to you. The dean wants to talk to you." And they brought him in the back room and they said, a whole office staff yelled out, "Surprise!" and gave him a surprise birthday party. Bought him brand new shoes, brand new kicks, brought him brand new clothes, bought him things that he would want, right? Brought him a cake, bought him all this stuff. This kid started crying right there in the middle of the office. You should have seen when they all sang happy birthday to him. You can tell that that there was something that was unlocked in his life. I haven't seen that kid up in the office yet since then. See, because what happens is it's not just about, us being there and being teachers and following some sort of format, or we got rules here and you need to follow the rules, young man. It's about saying, "Man, I really love this kid and I love them enough to lay myself down and say, I'm going to lay myself down on you, kid. I want you to get in vision. I want you to see what I see in you." But if you just see nothing, or you just see responsibility or a task, then they're going to feel like that they're a task. But if they feel like they mean something and that they're valuable and there's something good about them, and then there's going to be something that's going to be valuable in their lives, and then God's going to raise them up because they know that you believe in them. And the things you speak, you're speaking life and breath, and the neshama of life is going into them, and they're being raised up, and they feel life. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are good, then your whole body will be full of light. See, if they can see what you see, if you lend them your eyes for a moment, they may not have breath to sustain them, but I'm telling you today that if you lend them your breath and you lend them your vision, you lend them the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, and you inspire these kids. That word neshama means inspire. You got to inspire kids. You want them to get excited, and you got to inspire them. You got to let them see what you see. The last thing he does is he puts his hands on him. This is a show me generation. Right? What kids need today is not a curriculum, right? I tell people all the time, it's not a curriculum. But what kids need today isn't necessarily another great preaching and things like that. Listen, they're going to forget your preaching by the time they walk out the door. They're not going to remember. What they will remember is they will remember the way you made them feel, right? They need someone who cares enough to show them, to make them a little disciple. See, the reason why they're hanging out with you is because they understand that they can't get that hands-on experience by just showing up on that one day. They need to come next to you, and they need to spend time with them. They need you to be able to say, "Listen, you're my little disciple." And it's crazy because these kids will just hang on to you. When I'm doing duty, at the beginning of the day, and I'm watching the playground or whatever, the quad area, Kids are coming up to me all the time. Hey, Mr. Myers, giving me fist bumps, and they just want to be next to me, and hang out with me. If I shoo them off, and I say, oh, I don't have time to talk with you. See, one of the hardest things as a NewGen leader and as a NewGen teacher is that they're going to come up and talk to you about things that you don't even care about. Check out these Pokemon cards, right? Check out this. Look at this cool drawing of this cat, that I just drew. And you're like, wow, that is amazing. And you're like, that is the worst cat I've ever seen in my life. Did it get hit by a car? No, it didn't get hit by a truck. No, okay. But the reality is that when you start to experience it, they're letting you into their little world. And if we shoo them off, we don't make them a part of that, then what happens is we shoo them away, and all of a sudden, guess what? They're not there anymore to be shown and to be discipled. See, hands to hands mean this, is that we need someone who cares enough to show them how to be a man or woman of God, not just talk about it. You can't just talk about it. You can't talk about what it means to be a man of God. You can't talk about what it means to be a woman of God. You've got to be those things and show them in discipleship. They need mentoring. We even have mentors in the secular world. I have kids that I mentor that actually have mentors for, right? They don't want to read about it. They want to experience it. Last couple things. A show me generation means that you're an authentic person. Means that they want to see a Christian experience. They want to have a Christian experience, not just a Christian education. Show me how to pray. Show me how to worship. Show me how to be a Christian. Discipleship that spends time with them. Sometimes that's one of the hardest things, is to spend time with people that you're like, man, I don't have any of the same interests, right? Sometimes you got to go play video games you don't want to play, right? Sometimes you got to, go and do trips to places that you don't really want to go to. Last thing is this, Elijah went back twice. Sometimes it takes us going back twice because they're waiting for you to give up. Sometimes we need to go back a second time. Sometimes we write kids off too quickly, but they're waiting and they're testing you to see if you are consistent, right? Consistency is the key with these kids. Remember, they have a high sense of justice, so they want to know whether or not you're going to be able to be consistent with them. Sometimes our consistency will be the rock in their storm. Sometimes when they're having a storm in their life, they know they can come to you because you are consistent. You are consistent. Here's the basics. Don't be a substitute teacher. You know what? Subs don't plan. They walk in. Let me ask you a question. How did you treat a substitute when you were in school? Bad. Well, guess what? If you walk in unprepared, that's how they're going to treat you. The other thing is, every substitute has a different rule, okay? So if you have teams of people, a lot of our ministries, they have teams of leaders that are going in. You're not the only NewGen leader, right? So that was usually. So what happens is, from week to week to week, how would you like it if you had a new substitute every week? Every time a new leader comes in, they change rules. Every time that a new person comes in, well, these are my rules. I know that was so-and-so's rules last week, but now these are my rules. They got to remember your rules. So how about having a consistent game plan, having a consistent set of rules, a consistent set of things that aren't going to be changing on them? Because when things change, they say, but that's not how so-and-so does it, right? So-and-so gives us 20 minutes of free time at the end. What about you? Well, that's not how I do it. Okay, well, maybe we need to come together and come up with some consistent rules and procedures and schedules across all the teams. And there's the other thing. Love free time. Just spend some time in free time right now. Let me tell you what, free time is not your friend, and it's not free. Somebody pays for free time. You want me to tell you who pays? You do. You pay for free time. So there can be scheduled play time, right? Or scheduled, hey, let's kick it time, or scheduled this time. But it's not, hey, do whatever you want right now. It's like, this is what we're doing right now. So this is what I want you to do. We can go and do this, this, or this, right? So it's scheduled. It's not something that's like free. It's not just a free roaming. I never have that in my classrooms because I always pay the cost of free time, okay? There's different visual learning styles. Learning styles that you need to work on are basically things that not everybody learns the same. And in fact, there's been a big trend lately that people say, oh, well, I'm more of a visual learner. No, you're not. You actually learn by all of them at once. You might be more visually inclined a little bit, but the reality is that every one of us learns in these different styles. Write these down if you don't have them, or you can look them up, 7 learning styles. Visual, have things that are visual in the room. Don't just talk to them for an hour, right? Visual, right? What about solitary? Some time where they get to spend alone. Not everybody wants to be in group time all the time. How about social, time where they get together, because not everybody likes to be alone all the time, right? How about oral, right? We're listening to the word, or we're hearing something, right? Or music and things like that. Verbal, right? Obviously we speak, we preach a lot in Victory Outreach, but also physical, getting them up and getting them moving and things like that. Being logical. These are the things I was telling you about that you can incorporate in order to make transitions. You can be speaking a message for an hour and a half, 2 hours, but if your message is broken up with physical stuff, with doing things, getting up and doing a tug-of-war contest and talking about how, there's a tug-of-war, that's going on for your soul, right? Okay, we're going to put so-and-so in the middle and feel like how they feel, like they're being tugged back and forth, right? So you can do things like that, and it all is a part of your message, but it's giving them a break mentally, right? They don't have to listen all the time. They can see it. They can experience it, and they get involved, okay? Last thing I want to talk to you guys about is special needs, okay? And we're going to come in for a landing here. Like I said, there's been a lot of special needs students that have been coming into my classrooms, kids with autism. Right now, I probably have about a third of my class that is actually allocated to that. So that's a huge amount. So don't be surprised when we're getting, kids that have autism, kids that have different learning challenges and difficulties, right? Anxiety, they have depression, things like that. Here are some ideas that help me. Write these down if you've never seen these before. They're really good. These are things, by the way, that everybody can learn. Whether or not they're special needs or not, this is just good teaching, okay? So the things I'm sharing with you are things that I do for everybody in class because it's good for them. In other words, find out what the child's specific needs are. It's okay to ask questions. Don't be embarrassed to ask the parents. When you start noticing some things, hey, I noticed that Johnny doesn't like to sit down all the time. How can I help Johnny out a little bit more? And they might share with you, well, Johnny has autism, or Johnny has, attention deficit disorder, and, so it helps him to move around a little bit. Great. Next week, I'm going to definitely plan something that's going to be physical that I can get Johnny to be involved in, because now Johnny's going to be able to get up out of his seat and move around, but he's going to do it on my time, not just on his own, right? So we're going to develop a partnership with parents. That was mentioned earlier. Develop a partnership. Remember that they ultimately are responsible for their kid. Sometimes we take that responsibility on ourselves and we're like, man, I don't know what to do with this kid. And we want to be hospitable to those families, but remember, ultimately, it's the parent's responsibility. So involve the parent. If you're really having a hard time, it's okay to ask them to come, be a part of that service, and have a rotation of them coming in. Maybe you can even get several parents that have children that are like that. They can form a little coalition, right? And they can help each other out. The other thing is, children with special needs often experience sensory overload, right? So the hype man never stops. If the hype man never stops, they can't stop either. So if your class, or if your NewGen is always like this, high intensity, like, and you feel like a rave, right? And you're breaking out the glow sticks and you're going crazy, right? And if it's like that the entire way through, think about that from a kid who's already overly has an oversensory overload. They are like, oh my gosh, this is crazy. It's like a zombie apocalypse going on in their head, right? It's just chaos and madness going on. So we've got to be able to learn how to bring it up and bring it down in certain times, in certain ways, to be able to make sure that kid has time to lay down, right? And it's okay to also give them a time where they maybe, hey, leader, would you just take this kid out and just, take him for a little walk with you real fast and then just come on back in. A lot of times that's enough to calm them down, okay? It's important to prepare the classroom to avoid sensory overload and create a welcoming space. The other thing is class routines. Get a class routine going on, because what happens is a lot of times, because we have so many different types of leaders and different leadership teams that roll in, this is what happens. They have different things that they do all the time. But it's like if they know, hey, this is the preaching time and this is this time, and even you have it like up on a screen or up on on a poster, hey, this is what we're doing today. The kids with autism or kids with those sensory overloads, they can plan on it. Like, okay, well, next is this. And they can plan in their minds the transition. Kids with autism and kids that have special needs have a hard time transitioning. That's a big area there. So when they first come in to NewGen, they're going to be hard to settle down. When they are transitioning from one thing to the next, like time where they're doing unstructured play or whatever, or they're doing a structured play time, they're going to have a hard time actually being able to bring it down. The other thing is this, right? So the next thing is this. Use clear visuals, right? Indicate which areas of the room are permissible and which ones are off limits. Sometimes what we do is we just have a big open room like this, or we have a big open room, and then what happens is there's no signage that's telling us that these are off-limit spaces. Is alternative activities, right? Have an independent self-guided activity, something that they could do like on a Chromebook or something like that that's still along with their teaching. Maybe you can have some videos planned that you're like, hey, I've got like 5 videos ready to go for this one student because they need to put some headphones on, they need to be able to actually have a time to calm down. You can also have an area where they calm down, like I said, just walking around, preferred activities. Buddy system is good. Partner them with a positive role model. Have somebody that's next to them that can actually speak positively to them, okay? One of the things is, as a good teacher, you will include these techniques for everybody, okay? Give them a role within the class. One of the things is, like, you can actually have people actually be a part of the class. So instead of you just preaching all the time to them, have them get up out of their seats and have them come up and be a part of what's going on, right? Really, really important. The other thing is keep routines consistent, provide choices. Would you like to do this or would you like to do that, right? Those choices make a big deal. And this is for middle school in general. Giving people choice a lot will really help out. Also, plan a small group activity. Kids learn better with small groups. So instead of always speaking up here at the pulpit, maybe don't have a pulpit time and maybe get them into small groups, in those small groups, and have them do things together. They're going to learn a lot more. And then what are you doing? You're modeling to them the V groups that are going to take on later on in life. Hey, I was once a part of like small groups. I had a small group, and I got together with them in our NewGen class, and it was awesome, right? And then the last couple things is make accommodations and modifications. It's okay to modify things and make accommodations for people. But the last thing is keep them with close proximity, right? Keep kids with close proximity. What does that mean? That there are green zones. I'm going to kind of leave you with this. Is that there are green zones. And as a teacher, what happens is if I'm always up here in the front talking, I want you to picture there's like a green zone that's around me, okay? There's like this green zone that's all around me right here. But over there is the orange zone, and it's getting a little bit more out of my control. And in the back right there, what do we call that usually? Sinner's row, right? Sinner's row? Well, that's the red zone in our classes, in our NewGen classes. So what happens is that if I stay up here the whole time, then guess what? My green zone never changes. But if I move as a teacher and I move, and those of you that have seen me speak here at the church in Chino, you've seen me do this. I'll step away from the pulpit and I'll walk in amongst the kids. And I'll actually talk and I'll do my message as I walk. Why? Because I notice that so-and-so is getting disengaged in the back. So rather than me pointing out to them, because if I yell at them and go, hey, Johnny, you need to be quiet back there. I've told you before. You're going to have to go sit with your parents. What did I just do? I just highlighted him. Now he's not going to like me for sure. And remember we talked about he thinks he has an audience already. And now we're giving him a bigger audience. And he starts to shrink back more and more and more and doesn't want to be there more. So rather than doing that, what I'll do is I'll just walk over by Johnny and I'll put my hand on his shoulder while I'm talking. Or I'll just be like, kind of like just stand there next to him. And then all of a sudden, now Johnny's like this. He's got to pay attention because I'm standing over him, right? And I'm standing right next to him. So things like that will really help to create like a stability within your classroom, okay? The last thing is this, and I'm going to end with this, Ray, is that one of the things that we can do is we can be aware of potential distractions, right, that are taking place. Is that a lot of times when we have students that are autistic or having those maybe anxiety and things like that, a lot of times what we do is we don't look at it from their perspective. I started talking to you guys about the 3 kids that are up there. Myself, came from a good Christian home. My friend who came from a Christian home but was not modeled Christianity in his home. And then also my other friend who didn't come from a Christian home at all. And I think that sometimes one of the hardest things for us is to step foot. We can kind of think about those kids But what about the fourth kid that's not in the picture? The one who's maybe has those disabilities and has those things that are really, really challenging for that parent. That parent is exhausted. That parent is tired. That parent just wants to, drop off and just forget and just go and have some time alone. And what I'm trying to tell you is this, is that as a NewGen leader, as people, we have to put ourselves in the shoes of each one of those people to make sure that we're not leaving anybody out, and we say, you know what, how can I address some of these things? How can I address some of these situations, right? And ultimately, that kid needs a touch of God too. Ultimately, that kid needs a touch of God too, but in this particular case, it's most important for you to grab a hold of that parent. They're going to be your partner. And you've got to work with that parent to have that success with that kid. Because I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be one of the most difficult challenges. But remember, you're helping that parent to be able to have that kid be successful. So remember, the ultimate responsibility is always on the parent when it comes to kids that have special needs and things like that, right? So what I want to do is why don't we go and stand to our feet this morning as we close. And I just want to kind of almost have you review back in your mind what we've been talking about. Is that this NewGen ministry is such a vital ministry, and they're at this place where these kids are hurting, these kids are lost. Some of these kids are, they're experiencing their bodies for the first time. They feel a lot of shame. They feel a lot of humiliation. They think that they have an audience around them. And one of the best things you could possibly do is to be that teacher, be that NewGen leader who's crazier than them, who's more excited about them being there than them being there themselves, right? Who's that NewGen leader who sees in them something that they can't see in themselves. A NewGen leader that is willing to speak out and be prophetic in their life and to encourage them in a way where they say, how could they possibly think that about me? Because I don't see it in myself. My standard is so high, but I know that I'm so low. And to be that one that says, you know what? I don't care if if they seem like a little kid to me. I'm going to have them. They're going to be like a little disciple. And I think that is something that is key, that you don't just talk about it. Don't just tell them that they have potential. Don't just tell them that they're important to you, but show them that you are important, that they are important to you. And I kid you not, you're going to have kids you're going to have experiences like this, where a kid comes up to you and says, man, thank you so much. I'm going to leave you with this. I was at a store one day, and this kid came up. He smelled this older. It was actually he was an adult, a young man. He looked like he was homeless. He came up and gave me this hug, and I'm like, who is this homeless man giving me a hug? And I was like, hey, how you doing? You all right? Okay, And he goes, Mr. Myers, it's me, Brian. And I went, oh my gosh. It's the kid that used to read satanic Bibles in my class. But I never gave up on him. He would read satanic Bibles in my class. He would do tarot cards and things like that, and he wouldn't do his work, but he was sitting there reading in the satanic Bible. This guy melted when he saw me. He was like a kid again. He was like 12 years old again, and he comes and puts his arms around me, and he's like, you know what he said? He goes, look, I want to show you my drawings. I've been working on my drawings. I kid you not, I felt like I was back in the middle school. I felt like I was back like 10 years before, and he was there, and he was like, man, Mr. Myers, I just want to show you that, look, I'm doing good. And even though I could see he wasn't doing good, I want to let you know that you make that kind of an impact. You make that kind of impact. You might not see it now, but they will never forget the way that you made them feel. They will never forget that you spoke life over them and not death. They will never forget that you saw something in them that they didn't see in themselves. They will never forget that you were there to hold their hand through the experience and make sure that they knew they were just another person, but that God cared for them and God loves them and that you love them too. I want you to bow your heads with me today. Heavenly Father, we come before you this morning, and I just pray, God, the Lord, there was a a lot of information here, God. But Lord, I pray, God, that there is transformation as well, God. That, Lord, that we would know that there is something that is special with this NewGen ministry. That, God, it's a ministry, God, that, Lord, it takes us, oh, Father God, realizing that, God, they're just little kids still, God. They might be growing up. Their bodies might look different, God. But, Lord, mentally and emotionally and socially and all those things, God, they're just developing. They are just now starting to reach in, God, to their adulthood. And so, Lord, I pray, God, that the adults that are in this, women, God, that dedicate themselves to this ministry, that, God, they wouldn't just see it as a season and I'm just here until the next person gets raised up. Then I can go on to some serious ministry. But, God, but this, Lord, is a serious ministry for serious men and women of God. For men and women of God, Lord, that believe that they are making an impact throughout the world. And that, God, that they don't know, but they might be spending time with the next prophet. They might be spending time with the next preacher, with the next evangelist. They might be spending time with the next regional leader. They might be spending time, God, with the next international leader of our ministry, God. And in times to come, when they spend time and they see that person preaching behind the pulpit, they'll say, I was there, and I was there to help inspire them and to help share what I saw in their lives. And today, they're fulfilling the word of the Lord that came out of my mouth. Lord Jesus, let there be that kind of people here in this room, that we dedicate ourselves not to just be there and be on time and to be punctual and be at our post, but let the reality of this ministry, God, sink in our hearts, that we might be, God, a prophetic generation to speak to them, God. We love you so much in your son's name. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor Richard. Amen. Come on, give Pastor Richard a big hand. Awesome. Thank you, Pastor Richard. You know, on behalf of our team and everybody here, we really appreciate you. Come on, give him one more big hand. That's awesome. You can really feel the experience, the passion for that age group. And so we thank you very much for investing here. I know we had like over 20 people with multiple people there's several people online plus here in person. So we're excited. You know, as Pastor Richard was sharing, I was really, really thinking about NewGen International's vision within our vision. Amen. Sometimes, you know, our ministry, we target the inner city people of the world, right? And so if we're called to the task to minister to 11 to 14-year-olds, then as our international ministry is reaching treasures out of darkness, our place within the vision is coming alongside and all these treasures. Some of them have children, you know. Some of them have young people, 11-year-old, 12-year-olds, that are part of that family getting saved and brought into the outreach, assimilating into church, a brand new life. So we have such a critical role to be able to, as we're taking the world, we're bandaging up a very, very special age group and bringing them along for the ride as their whole families get touched, and we're winning and evangelizing cities of the world. And so it's a great privilege to be able to be a part of NewGen. Again, Pastor Richard, thank you so much. That's what we really want to do, and we're going to continue to do, is do trainings like this to really equip us. Do you guys feel equipped here today? Good stuff to really understand. So now, when you do NewGen, now you have a whole new perspective of where they're at, what they need, what's going on in their minds, the changes that are going on in their life, and the life stage that they're in. I mean, you've just got like a little badge on your what do you call it? You know, in your military, you just got a little star, bing. You know, like you went through an important, critical training to be able to be a more effective leader. And so again, Pastor Richard, thank you. It was so awesome. Give him one more big hand. Praise the Lord. And so at this time.